Comics.
Because they have no home.
I'm Joe Getcho.
And I'm Mike White. And this is the Clean Comic Book Podcast. We like comics because they have no bones.
No bones.
Find us on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast or on Blue Sky Social or X. At Boneless Comics 1. And use the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast to join the conversation and share your thoughts.
That is right. So today's Boneless review, if you've been paying attention, is going to be part 2 of a 2-part series. So if you haven't listened to part 1, you should listen to part 1 because 1 comes before 2. And this is part 2, where we're going to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Villains, a collaborative micro-series by various writers and artists, which was published in 2013 by IDW. And since this is a micro-series where each issue has a different story featuring a villain from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle universe, we've broken up the discussion for this one by issue. So just as a reminder, we're going to give you a brief summary of each one along with our discussion on that issue. And then we'll kind of do like a wrap up at the very end with everything.
Yes, if all you care about is cold hard data, you can skip to the end of this one where we actually will give a rating. So, but hopefully that's not all you care about.
Skipping.
Yeah, so you should listen to the whole thing. Again, because there's 8 issues, we've broken our review into 2 separate episodes. So this is part 2. In this episode, which is part 2 of 2, we will cover Karai, Hun, Bebop and Rocksteady. That's one issue for them, and the Shredder.
We like
Comics.
So to start things off with, Karai today. It was written by Eric Burnham with art by Corey Smith. So Karai, finding it difficult to accept her grandfather, Oroku Saki, as the new leader of the Foot Clan, visits her old school and speaks about her youth. So she's Oroku Karai, of course, the family name being first in Asian cultures, whereas Oroku Saki is her grandfather. So raised by Oroku Yori, Karai was denied the chance to fight or claim any family honor for herself, as her parents wanted her to be a proper girl. But behind their backs, she studied the words of the Ashi no Himitsu, the record of her Foot Clan. And as she learned, she eventually destabilized her father's organization and vowed to rebuild it without him. So something that I actually forgot to include here in the synopsis is that not only did she vow to rebuild it without him, but she ends up basically getting him killed to make room for herself. So, however, after Karai revived Oroku Saki, he chose another for his second, or his Chunin, a mutant turtle named Leonardo. So after a brief fight, Karai realizes something is kind of off about this turtle, enough that she could kill him, actually. And so she's kind of going, it's not like the other times that I've fought Leonardo. Like something's muddled about him. But because she fears the Shredder's retribution, she decides not to kill Leo right away. Instead, she goes back to consolidating power in the shadows and is looking for 2 volunteers to further that goal. So, and those 2 volunteers we will talk about a little bit further down the line. So this one is focused on Oroku Karai. So one thing that I noticed right away about this one, especially in regards to the Chunin, is that this requires more buy-in and more knowledge of what was happening in the IDW Ninja Turtles comics at the time. Did you feel like the story provided enough context to piece together which turtle was Shredder's Chunin? Because I was very confused. I was like, which one is it? He's not wearing a blue bandana. It's black. He's got like multiple weapons. So I couldn't identify him with that. I actually had to go to the wiki and go, oh, I guess Leo had a point in time where the Shredder brainwashed him and used him as his second. So
yeah, I think because he shows up in a couple of these issues in this series, and I think they actually reveal him as Leo later. So I kind of wondered if they did that on purpose to be like, if you didn't know who it was, we aren't going to tell you right away, and kind of let the reveal happen later if you didn't already know about it. But I felt that way where it's like, okay, is this one of the Ninja Turtles or is this a different turtle? Because they've tried to add different turtles over the years in different iterations. So, there's like 2 different female turtles, I think at least, and whatever else. So I was like, is this a different one or is this one of ours who's been brainwashed? And I don't think I got that answer here. I think one of the other issues answered that. But as far as everything else goes, it seemed like there was enough context that I got that, she was the granddaughter and the father or Shredder's son was like, I'm going to go the businessman route and be like,
Mhm.
on the administration side and turn us into an enterprise. And Oroku Saki's spirit was like, well, that's not what the Foot Clan is. We're gangsters and we kill, 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 destroy, destroy. And he's not doing that. But my granddaughter studies the ancient ways. And so I can manipulate her into bringing my ghost back to life. And when she does that, I'll repay her with throwing her aside because this turtle is more formidable than Karai is probably because he's a mutant, which again, why is he picking a mutant? And where is Alopex? Because we know that Alopex
Right.
was picked as his Chunin. So that was kind of another conflict of like, what,
Yeah.
who is
It
the second in command anyway? Is it
it
Alopex
felt
or the
like
turtle?
to me that and I don't know the original publication schedule of these issues,
Hmm.
but it felt like to me a story had happened in between the last issue of Villains and this issue that had moved things along in the Foot Clan organization. So I felt like I was missing a step there because all of a sudden Leo is the second in command. And I'm like you, I looked it up. There's even like sort of a bandage across the chest. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, maybe it's Jenica or one of the female turtles that's like all taped up or something. And I was scouring the internet and I found something that was like, oh, there's an alternate universe. There's sort of like a what if series called Ninja
Mm.
Turtles Divergence, where in that Leo just is Shredder's Chunin for like the whole run of that series,
Wow.
I guess. But for the mainline continuity, I guess this was like a single arc that happened where he was able to brainwash him and then, the turtles had to find a way to break that and get him out of the organization
Mm.
without killing him, basically. So, without having all of that context, yeah, I was really hung up on this one plot point. And I was just like, I have to know, like, who is he? Especially because I'm like, I'm going to do a podcast later. I don't want to say it's this character and it actually be, somebody else. So I did research on the wiki, but I will say it was more difficult than any research I've done for DC or Marvel Comics because for Ninja Turtles, it seems like they have distinct publication eras with different companies. You've got Mirage Studios, then there was a period of time when Image Comics actually published the Ninja Turtles,
Mm.
then IDW had a time when they had the license. So it seems like um, Kevin Eastman is like moving the rights around to whoever will, goes, oh, we want to publish Turtles comics now. And there's a lot of different distinct continuities. So I had to make sure that I was like finding this specific one for this from this company to be like, okay, yes, it is Leo. So it was just, but by the time I got to like writing discussion questions, I was like, this should not have been this difficult for me to figure out. But again, if I was reading the main book, I probably would have been fine. It's just that wasn't included here in this story.
That
So
must have really been a sticking point because that was a really complex amount of research that you went through to find out this answer. Whereas I was kind of like,
yeah,
huh, mystery turtle. I wonder if it's, this or that, or maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. And then kind of, moved on. But you're like, I
yeah.
must know who this is.
No, I really got hung up on it. I think too because I was thinking, why did Shredder pick this guy
Yeah.
or girl? Why is this the person that he chose? And what I came to after discovering the identity was, oh, it makes sense. He's playing mind games with the turtles and with Splinter themselves. He's going, look, I can take your leader, your best guy, and turn him and make him work for me. And now
Yeah.
he's on my side. And I think that rubbing it in the Turtles and Splinter's faces was more important than giving Karai her due for resurrecting him. So
Yeah.
once I learned the identity, that kind of made the rest of the story fall into place for me. So I was glad that I did the research. I was a little bit lost on that for a second. So yeah.
Well, aside from that aspect, the rest of the story kind of seemed like Jin Kazama, where it's like his
He
grandfather has
does.
the, and then Kazuya is kind of like the business, end of it. And although he does fight and get his hands dirty, but
Mhm.
it's like the Mishima Corporation and all that stuff. And Jin is like caught in between, like he's supposed to inherit his father's legacy or his grandfather's legacy, but he kind of, is a
Mhm.
rebel at the same time. So maybe it's a little different than Karai because she really wants it, but it's just,
She she wants it, but I don't think that like many people, like we just found out with Alopex, their idea in their head of who the Shredder is and who he actually is are
yeah.
not the same thing. So I think what's really fascinating about this is that this introduces sort of mystical elements into
Hmm.
the Ninja Turtles lore. Whereas with Krang and that stuff, we had more like hard sci-fi. There's aliens and there's been genetic experimentation. But with this, there's actually a sorceress. Her name is like I forget what it is. It's like Kunitsumi or something like that.
Kitsune.
But the
Kitsune.
Kitsune, yeah, yeah. There's actually a sorceress that has like ensnared Leo's mind to put him in the Shredder's service. And we also have Karai in this story literally communing with Oroku Saki's ghost in the
Hmm.
underworld. Like she thinks it's a dream at first, and then she's like, "Oh no, it's actually like his spirit. I'm going to resurrect him because that will bring back the
Well, she
honor
like
of my
he like scratches her
family."
hand and then
Yeah,
she's like, ow, and so that's his proof. But then when she wakes up, she does still have the scratch on her hand, and it's like,
right.
oh, that was totally real. Like Lazarus
Yeah.
Pit, you know, kind of Batman stuff where it's like there's something going on here and yeah, like you said, it's kind of like more mystical, and I thought that was kind of
Mhm.
weird because I guess I didn't realize that Shredder was because at some point he says something about like he's been waiting for this for centuries or something like that, and
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, he's waited for centuries, so how old is Shredder exactly? And if he's her grandfather, then how old is she? Like it starts to
You
get a
would
little
think it would be
like,
more than centuries. I
yeah,
mean, less. You would
less.
think it would be less than centuries if she's only like two
Right.
generations
Or
away from him.
he's earlier up on the family tree. Like maybe he's the
Sure.
great 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 grandfather, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And the family has distorted over the years and all of the
Mhm.
Mishimas, oh, I mean the Orokus are not worthy. And so that's why he comes to her and says, "Hey, you are the only one that's worthy." And so it gives her this identity that here I am again as useful to Shredder, but I have a
Right.
legacy to inherit now. So that's who I am, is I am the next generation
Mhm.
of the Foot Clan, except that when she brings Shredder back, no, just kidding. I'm taking my throne back and thanks, but no thanks. You can go somewhere else while I put this turtle as my second in command. Like,
Yeah. So it
yikes.
kind of furthered that what I feel like is now a consistent character trait of him recognizing somebody as being powerful and worthy, but also going, I want to keep you a little bit further away from the
Hmm.
consolidation of power because maybe you're too good at what you do, and I want to stay in charge. That's not spelled out explicitly, but that kind of feels like Shredder's pattern now at this point, where
Yeah.
he's going, there's basically two Kunomitsus or two female ninjas that have served under him that are like amazing that he's like maybe don't get too close.
Hmm.
Of course, he doesn't do anything like as awful to Karai as he did to
At
Alopex.
least that we see in
It's
this.
just it's yeah, that's true. It's just more of like she's slighted because she's like I've worked my entire life to restore the honor of the Foot Clan and to, bring
Hmm.
it back to what it used to be. I even got rid of my own father because he was making bad deals and he was like selling off parts of the organization to the Russians. And it's sort of that mob mentality if we have to like retain the purity of our group or whatever. She's sort of returned to those values. You would think that he would respect that, but it's more like he's threatened by it than
Yeah.
anything else. So
Well,
yeah,
because he
but her
values
her
like
beef with
dominance
him,
and supremacy
yeah,
above anything else. Like, I'm the best, I
hmm
will be the best, and no one will be as good as me. And that's his mentality, pretty much.
yeah, which in a way is a lot less interesting than Karai's sort of uh reason for being and what drives her.
Hmm.
I personally think that the way she's built as a character there's more interesting stuff to explore there and more to do with her as a villain in the Ninja Turtles universe than there is with the Shredder himself. Because you actually sort of grow to care about her mission a little bit. And I like the idea that Shredder existed, but that now we sort of have like a legacy that's been left behind, and maybe that person is trying to run things a different way. I find that
Mhm.
much more interesting than just Shredder as sort of the arch villain, I'm evil guy, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you get that kind of like destroying the childhood home thing that he did with
Mhm.
Alopex. You do kind of get that here because he built her up as you are, the perfect person to lead the Foot Clan. And so it was kind of
Mhm.
cool that we had Oroku Saki as a ghost sort of manipulating things behind the scenes. It's like even without a physical form, he's still a threat because he knows how to manipulate people. Like that's what's really awesome about the Kingpin in the Daredevil TV
Yeah.
universe, and especially with Born Again, is it's like that is Kingpin's superpower is not his giant body, but it is how he
Mhm.
can find where someone is weak and exploit it to make them do whatever he wants. And I started seeing Shredder that way, and I was like, well, that almost makes him more exciting as a legend. So maybe keep him as a
Yeah.
ghost manipulating things behind the scenes because he's more deadly that way. But then at some point he does get his body back, and absolutely he goes to Karai and he goes, "Hey, thanks for leading, but I'm back now, so you can just go, stand in the corner, go crawl." Like he completely is like, "You were worthless to me now because you were only good to me as my vessel while I was in spirit form. But now that I have my
Yeah.
own body, I don't care what happens to you." And seeing the like look of horror on her face, and now she has a decision to make. Does she fall in line as a peon when she was supposed to be the leader, or does she rebel and bring the organization down? But the thing is, like, I
Right.
think her loyalty is more to the Foot than it is to Shredder. And
Yeah.
whereas Alopex, she doesn't necessarily have loyalty to the Foot themselves, more so because it's like the organization that raised her. But I think that she could go fully and detach herself from the Foot and go her own direction. Whereas Karai is like, I love the Foot. I love the Foot.
Yeah. I love the foot.
I love
The
feet.
foot and
No, the
nothing but
Foot.
the
The
foot.
clan. The clan. Um, but she loves the Foot Clan and what they do and what they stand for. She just doesn't want
Sure.
Shredder to be in her way. And I think that
Yeah.
that makes this very complex and very, very interesting to your point.
Yeah, well, it's cool because this is one of them. I mean, I was rooting for Alopex as well, but like I really felt Karai's rejection in this story to the point where I was like, I know she's a bad guy, but I kind of want to see her succeed. Like I want to see her get rid of the Shredder and actually take over the Foot Clan and see what that looks like as opposed to
Hmm.
the way he's been running the organization. Because that kind of like status quo shift would be really interesting. And the only place that I'd encountered her before was in, I think the 2007 animated movie that they did with like Imaji Studios or whatever. Karai was the leader of the Foot in that movie. She wasn't the villain. She ended up having to like team up with the Turtles to take down Patrick Stewart, which I don't remember why he
You
was
got to
the
watch out
villain,
for
but
Patrick
it's been
Stewart.
too. Yeah, but for whatever reason, but
Make it
at the
so.
time, I remember thinking, like, who is this character? Like, why isn't it Shredder in her place? Like, I don't care about this person. But now that I've read this issue, I'm like, I'm actually interested to know
Yeah.
more about her journey, and like, I want to see where things go from here. So,
Do you have another anything else you want to discuss with Karai?
no, I don't think so.
We like
Comic. Let us talk about Hun, which Hun is not a pet name for Hun or Honey, but
Oh, what's up, hon?
but it was written by Mike Costa and Ben Epstein with art by Mike Henderson. So the story actually kicks off during an AA meeting where a guy named Arnold, and not Arnold like Arnold, but kind of like
Arnold.
Arnold,
He
uh,
kind of looks like him.
yeah. Where a guy named Arnold gets to the chopper. Oh, wait, no. He opens up about his rough younger days in this AA meeting, where he was wild and he was dangerous in his youth, but then he got married to someone who helped straighten him out and even had a kid. But then his life unraveled as his wife got sick, he lost his job, his son was attacked and seriously injured. Yet no matter how bad his life gets, he refuses to drink. He will not go back to drinking. Then we find out brainwashed Leo, working for Shredder, knocks him out and says with a smirk, "And to think, you used to be Hun." So Shredder offers Arnold a second chance. Lead the Purple Dragons again as Hun, but this time with mutagenic ooze in his veins. So Arnold literally trades his booze for ooze to amplify his strength and help him put his house in order.
I didn't realize that it rhymed.
Yes, his booze for ooze. So, powered by the ooze, he puts his house in order. He storms back into the dragon's territory, reclaims his throne, takes out rival gangsters, and repays Shredder with the money. But Arnold narrates this differently during the AA meeting, saying he got his job back. He reconnected with old coworkers. He followed step 8 to make amends with him, and then his boss was thrilled.
Well, all of that is technically true.
Technically, yes. So then he goes and he visits his hospitalized son, claiming that he's turned his life around for the better, and he gifts his son Casey a Casey Jones mask. And this blew me away because I had no idea
Yeah.
what I was reading. And then back in the AA meeting, he flashes this 1 month sobriety chip, and he says, "One day at a time," and that's his story. So it was really interesting that there was a lot of stuff going on here, and I did do some research on this one because I was like, Casey Jones, what? So I have some questions and answers to go over that a little bit later. But the
Sure.
first thing I wanted to talk about was that his AA testimony was kind of like a rewritten version of his gang violence, which was kind of like Doctor Doom's narrated origin story where he framed himself as the hero. And, that guy Richards, they think he's smart for some reason. I don't know why. Obviously they
Right.
don't know what smart is because they're choosing Reed Richards of all people, that kind of thing. So it's like we're seeing from
Sure.
his perspective where he's like, all these good things happen to me when they're really not good things.
Well, it's funny because it really brings into focus how you can say something in a neutral way and it can sound very positive when you're actually describing something really horrible.
Yeah,
Because he did get his old job back. He is back on top by his own definition of the word, but really he's a mob boss and he's like killing and beating people for money and probably pushing drugs and all that kind of stuff too.
hmm,
But and he's reliant upon a drug himself again too, and he just traded, like you said, the ooze for the alcohol, which I didn't know that it worked this way, but apparently you can take it without fusing yourself with an animal and it'll just beef you up into Bane. I mean, that's
apparently.
kind of what they were going for with this. Um, so yeah, I had no idea he had any connection to Casey Jones. I had no idea that Casey Jones had a father that was a character. I'd never heard the Purple Dragons before. This one was like totally new
Hmm.
information overall. As far as him being a reliable narrator or not, I feel like what he told us was what happened. It's just the way he described it in the AA meeting was so middle of the road that you could take the
Yeah.
meaning either way. It's
Well,
like,
and
well,
it's kind of
oh wow,
like,
we're so proud of you. You're doing great. And
yeah, it's like I can't really divulge company secrets because, NDAs and all that stuff. But what I can say is that my boss was thrilled and I sort of cleaned house with the boardroom, as in like he killed them all. But, you
right.
don't want to say that, because that's company information. So I'll just say that we're under new management now. Yeah.
Is it odd that he would go to an AA meeting at all if after all of this is transpired?
So that was another thing that I thought was really great about this is not that he was an alcoholic, but that we really
Sure.
gave him his motivation was really based on his character flaw, which was
Yeah.
addiction. And so
Uh-huh.
the ooze was, and I say he traded the booze for ooze because it sounds funny and it rhymes, but it's like he really did trade one addiction for another. So
Hmm.
so I was like, if alcohol and Red Bull gave him wings instead of the ooze, would he have tried to stop drinking in the first place? Would he even be at an AA meeting? Because it's like he was
Right.
using the alcohol to get over his problems, but then he traded using the ooze to get over his problems by now he can kill anyone who stands in his way. So it was really interesting to have this like his character flaw is this thing, and the way that it's exploited in this fictitious universe is this ooze that transforms him into this really powerful hitman, kind of thing. And I don't know, I
Right.
just thought that was really interesting that it wasn't, it was something different other than his ego is
Sure.
out of control or his
Well, I
childhood
like
home
that.
was wrecked or, anything like that.
I like that Casey recognized it immediately too, because he comes to Casey in the hospital and he starts bragging about how big he is, and Casey's like, "Oh, so you traded the bottle for juice, huh?"
Hmm.
He's basically like Casey thinks he's on steroids, but still, I mean, basically he is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a performance enhancing thing that makes him stronger, and yeah, so it does kind of continue that trend of the Shredder finding where this person is weak and finding a way to exploit that and get them to work for him.
Right.
So that's what he's doing with Hun here as well.
And part of the other thing that you really don't get just in this story is that the reason he's called Hun is for Attila the Hun.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
the other thing is this is where you have so much different continuity of different people doing different writing in different formats, and this is
Sure.
sort of a convergence. So in the original 1987 cartoons, we have a character named Arnold Jones who is not Hun, but he was just a guy who was a member of the Purple Dragons. But his murder is what drives his son Casey to become a hero. So it's kind of like Daredevil in that aspect
Whoa.
where his father was killed, and that's kind of what made him pursue being a hero. So that's kind
Okay.
of like the original version. Hun, Attila the Hun, was actually Attila the Frog, a member of the Florida-born
What?
mutant frogs, which included Genghis Frog, Napoleon Bonafrog, and Rasputin the Mad Frog. So,
Okay.
so in this story, yes. We have sort of an integrated version of the father, Arnold Jones, and the
Hmm.
gangster, Attila the Frog, who is now Attila the Hun because he's not a frog, so he gets a human name.
Sure.
Does that give him kind of more or less of a reason to become a hero than in the original version? So, like, is Casey's choices, how is that different? Is it better or worse?
I like I like the idea that Casey is sort of looking at his father's life and going, I know I don't want that. And
Hmm.
so I'm going to go against that. What the comic book character that he reminded me of the most actually was not Daredevil, it was Huntress because her father is a mob boss. And
Ah,
due to her father being a mob boss, like a whole bunch of her family gets killed, like all these horrible things happen to her, and she sort of sees the result of that violence in her life, and then she becomes a vigilante to fight against that violence. And so in my brain, I was kind of like, oh, Casey has kind of a similar thing going where you could say the purple dragons are like the Bertinelli family or
yeah.
something like that. But that was where my brain went to. You're right that the if he got killed, it would have been just like Daredevil, basically, as far
Hmm.
as except that I think Daredevil's father, while he wasn't like a great guy, I think he was like trying to do the right thing at least, whereas Hun feels like he's a little less well intentioned.
Yeah.
Um, Although I don't know. I mean, the fun thing about this issue is that he's complex enough that you could kind of see him going either way towards being good or evil. And it's really the addiction that's his problem. And if you get rid of that, like maybe he could change and
Hmm.
make himself better. But you definitely feel like by the end of it that Casey is like, I know you're never going to change. And I'm going to go out there and do my own thing. I'll
Yeah.
take this hockey mask, sure, but I'm going to go fight bad guys with sports supplies.
Well, I mean, there's a DC character who does that. So, Sportsmaster.
Sportsmaster, yeah.
Yeah. So
Sportsmaster.
why not? I'm just glad that
Yeah,
it's not Attila the Frog though, because if this was about a frog, obviously that would make Casey Jones being a human extremely weird. But aside from
right.
that, if this was a Attila the Frog, it would be kind of like I don't know, it'd be a little weird. Um,
it'd be a little harder to care about him if he's a
yeah.
frog man.
So I think it's
Um,
good that he's a human man, whereas Alopex, you could argue, has sort of a similar, not the same as like the Huntress or Hun, but sort of a similar
mhm,
vibe of this is the organization and you belong to it, and then her going, no, I don't
right,
want to belong to it. I'm going to be a vigilante and fight against it. But it's like
sure,
a different path, and that he's not a mutant in the same way, not a mutant animal. I think
right.
gives it a lot of strength as a character.
Yeah, it feels like the ooze there. I'm glad that they didn't mutate him into some kind of animal hybrid
Yeah.
because I like the idea that there is a guy out there that's big enough and strong enough to take on the turtles without turning himself into an animal person. Because
Hmm.
while that is kind of the Ninja Turtles thing, like that's a big part of their universe. I don't want every character to be that, so it's nice to have some variety.
Yeah.
I did think when I was reading this though that I would almost wish the Purple Dragons was its own separate organization that had no connection to Shredder, because I feel like it would make more sense for there to be different criminal empires at work in the city,
Yeah.
because New York is big. And maybe Shredder and the Purple Dragons get into gang wars and stuff like that, and the Turtles have to settle that for whatever reason. But it seemed like that would be more interesting than just folding him into, well, he's
Yeah.
another guy on the take from the Shredder. So
Right. He's the head of a criminal organization, but it's subservient to the Foot. So it's really kind of
right.
ends up being the same thing at the end of the day. Yeah, I agree with you. If it was like almost like a rival faction, or maybe just a different kind of faction that maybe they didn't butt heads because their agendas were just so different that they kind of
Right.
just existed out there. Because yeah, when you put everything through the lens of the Foot, you get fungus. No, you get stink. No, you get not real feet, but the Foot Clan.
Toe
Um,
Jam.
Toe Jam. You if you take
And
the
they're
Foot Clan and everything leads back to them and everything leads back to
yeah.
Shredder. Shredder likes that because he likes to be on top, but at the same time, it makes the world feel a little more two-dimensional
It
versus
feels
being
smaller.
versatile. Yeah,
Yeah. The world definitely feels smaller when it all kind of links back to one guy.
right.
So I don't know. That's not to say I was disappointed by that story. It's just that's our thing that you love, Nate, about how we would rewrite stories. That's what I would do to maybe change it just a little bit. So
All right.
um
Anything else for Hun? Hey, Hun. Anything else,
no,
Hun?
I think we're good, hon.
All
Uh
right. Well, our next story is actually going to be about people who gained the powers of animals, unlike Hun. So that'll be fun.
We like
Comic.
So next we're going to be talking about Bebop and Rocksteady. The story is by Ben Bates and Dustin Weaver, and the art is by Ben Bates. And so I guess we have a writer artist on our hands here. Bebop and Rocksteady are two down on their luck thugs looking for their next big score. After being drummed out of a gang, they decide they need to change things up a little bit, and they hear about the Foot Clan from a friend. Wanting a quick trip to the top, they accept Karai's offer to turn them into mutants. But they have to kill all of their compatriots to prove that they're worthy. So there's actually a panel of like Bebop and Rocksteady standing there shirtless with like they still have like the punk hairdo and like the aviator hat, but
Yeah.
they have like blood all over their hands because they've just like beat a bunch of guys to death. Finally, changing into a warthog, Bebop, and a rhino, Rocksteady, Karai pronounces them ready for a mission. Unfortunately, they quickly blow a deal that Karai has set up to increase her power, and they also cause the death of the rival Ghost Boy gang and a lot of property destruction in the process. So, while they're then able to kill waves of foot soldiers that are fighting in retaliation, Karai shows them that she is still like far superior to them in fighting. And I mean, she has, I think, Bebop in a chokehold at one point and like a knife in his mouth, where she's like, if you move, I could kill you at any moment.
Hmm.
So, but recognizing that they are capable of great destruction, even though they're idiots, and they can also survive like getting shot at and shuriken, Karai decides to keep them around for now. And so excited to finally be part of a gang, Bebop and Rocksteady head home, a home that they decide to wreck in retaliation of their new, or in celebration of their new life.
Yeah.
So they are idiots basically, and
Yeah.
I have to say that as soon as I started reading this issue, it's something about the visual of Rocksteady holding the machine gun that in my mind, I immediately heard that boss theme music from Ninja Turtles Arcade, where it's the and I like immediately was like, I want to go jump kick him. I want to go play this game. Like for some reason, just that visual alone was enough to like trigger that memory of the video game. So
Nice.
yeah, what is there to say about them? I mean, they're dumb as a box of rocks. They've been kicked out of every gang they've ever been in, and they join under Karai because she's like trying to consolidate her power, and they make a big mess of things. So that's pretty much the story. Um, did you feel like there was really anything deeper that the writer could have said about them? Because they're kind of like the dumb heavies. I mean, and this story is very much like we are kicked out of a gang. We want a new gang. Oh, look, a quick fix. Darn, we messed it up. Thank goodness she won't kill us. And that's basically the story. Like,
So
yeah.
I think there is way more to this story than that. And I think that the story was written so appropriately for their characters. It's like the method of
Mm,
story writing kind of thing, like matched their personalities. So basically you have these two guys who are losers, but they know how to fight. And
hmm.
they're like, we're losers. We need some money and to, some prestige or whatever. Hey, well,
Sure.
my cousin's brother's uncle's roommates knows this guy named Vinny who works for this clan called the Foot or
It
something.
was just like that too.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could go make a buck there. So these two losers want to go be cool and they show fighting prowess to the point where the Foot's like, we can use them. It turns them into gigantic wrecking machines, but all it does is it only changes them physically. So instead of being
Right.
losers who can kick people's butts, now they're losers with mutant powers who still kick people's butts. So it's like
Right.
they got this huge thing that would radically change somebody's life, and they just went back to living life like they always do. Like they
Yeah,
didn't
pretty
change at
much.
all. They are the same from start to finish. They're the dumb heavies, and they got oozed, and they got mutant powers, and they're still the dumb heavies. But what I was disappointed with, and this was one of your note questions, was
Hmm.
Karai. I was like, Karai, what are you doing? Like, clearly these guys
Yeah.
are idiots and they're destructive. So wouldn't you start them off as blunt instruments and use them that way instead of making them bodyguards in a very sensitive negotiation? Like, I actually thought that Karai was the dumb one for using them wrong in the first place. And it
Yeah.
takes her until the end of the issue to realize this is how I should use these guys instead. Like, girl, Shredder would have been all on that like after 2 seconds. He would have seen their destructive power, put them where they needed to go, and taken care of business. Whereas she's like, what shall I do with them? I'll make them bodyguards and hope that everything goes okay. And it goes chaotically wrong.
It made her look really green that she took these guys
Yeah.
that are clearly just meatheads and she used them as she's like I want you guys to be quiet and just stand there and at first it's kind of cool because the Ghost Boys leader is like oh the Foot Clan has really surprised me and I didn't know that they had creatures like this in their employ but then as soon as Karai walks away Bebop is like looking at the Ghost Boy guys and he's like, "Hey, isn't this cool that we're both in a gang?" And then the Ghost Boy guys are just like, "You're an idiot. Like, what are you talking about?" And then they get bored, so they do the like, put the finger under your nose
Look down here.
and
What's down
flip it
there?
up thing.
Boom.
They do that old trick, but because they're mutants, they like almost break the guy's neck doing it, and then that starts this gigantic brawl and it's just like they're the people that you want to use when you just want to cause indiscriminate destruction, but they are
Yeah.
not somebody that you want next to you when you're in any kind of a negotiation. Like they're too dumb for that. So yeah, it made her look stupid that she trusted them
Yeah.
with that much power that soon. And I wish that the writer had made a different choice there.
Yeah. Well, and the thing was like they didn't know their own strength. So part of it was that like corporate America does is they release something new for their employees that they don't test and they just throw it on them and
Mhm.
say this is going to make your job 10 times easier and it makes it 100 times worse until they either pull the plug on the program or they finally get their stuff together and do it right so that it's actually something beneficial for the employees or maybe they never do. But
Right,
that was
right.
really what Karai did was it's like so you have these new untested tested weapons that you don't know their capabilities and you just throw them out in the field and say hey don't do anything just stand there and don't touch anything like that's very
Right.
risky. Why wouldn't you want to know their capabilities first before you take them anywhere? That was another
Yeah,
oversight.
I mean, even if she just sent them after the turtles just to see how well they could fight or something, I mean that would
Yeah,
have been better
live or
than
die at
something.
least we'll know what you're capable of.
Yeah, at least then we're leaning towards their blunt instruments, and we know that. And yeah, I felt like this story kind of retroactively weakened Karai's story, unfortunately, which was a shame because I really liked her character and I wanted to see where they would take it. And but Bebop and Rocksteady just, yeah, they are what they are. I do like your point though that the character development in this story, the reason it's because I kind of read it and I was like, that's kind of a nothing sandwich where there's like, it's a story, but nothing, they don't change at all. They're exactly the same. But I guess that's the point, is that their character development is that they're not capable of having any character development.
Yeah,
They're
well it's
just
like
gonna stay the same no matter what happens to
they
them.
don't need it
So
because the way that their characters were created is really the
sure.
part of it. Because like when he does the prank on the guy and like you see him like flicking his nose upward, but it's like his head recoils and there's blood, and he's like, "You broke my nose,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oopsie," and they do all this stuff, and then they're like, "Oh, we're fighting," and then they go crazy. That was hilarious. I was laughing my socks off the whole time reading this. Like this is hilarious. Like these characters are funny and like you hear bebop and rocksteady and it's like oh bebop and rock so it's like musical and stuff
Right.
right but then later they say oh rocksteady and bebop and I was like oh that's backwards and then I was like but the initials are R and B if you call them rocksteady and bebop
Oh
so then it's like a
my
music joke within a music
gosh.
joke even though R&B is rhythm and blues but
It
it's not
is,
rock
yeah.
and bebop but
Rock and
still
Bebop.
it's kind of fun and it's like I wish that they could have leaned into the music more like maybe they were like some kind of loser garage band musicians that just couldn't catch a break and they
Mhm.
wanted to rock and their stage names were Bebop and Rocksteady because it's R&B, it's funny and then somebody says that's not what R&B stands for because they're idiots and then, it's like I feel like there's so much to make their
Yeah,
characters
yeah, yeah.
entertaining in this that I didn't see them as the dumb heavies at all. I was like, they're the comic relief. They're
Yeah,
interesting in their own way.
that's a much better way to look at this story. I think that after maybe 5 or 6 issues of or this is issue 7, isn't it?
Yeah.
After 6 issues of like here's the deep character development behind this person and why you should care about them. I was expecting more, but I should have gone into it more with the mindset of this is a nice thing to break up the tone that we've been dealing with for the last
Hmm.
6 issues. It's a nice kind of breather before we get into the next one, which is going to be the Shredder.
Yeah.
I did have a little bit of criticism of the art only in the action sequences specifically because I felt like it got so out there and crazy that there were some sequences where it was hard for me to tell what was going on without like
Mm.
really studying the image. I think that the sort of crazy, like over the top style really works for Bebop and Rocksteady's characters. And when you're
Yeah.
just seeing them kind of standing around talking or maybe doing like a quick action, but when they get into it with like 30-foot ninjas, the page was so muddled that I was like, I don't know if I I would have preferred something well, it's my same complaints about like shaky cam in movies, right? Like I never got over that thing where even in the Batman, I love the Batman. I think it's a great movie. I love the portrayal of Bruce Wayne that it gives us, but it drives me nuts that during the car chase sequence that for most of it we're looking at the flame on the end of the Batmobile and everything's shaking because I
Yeah.
can't get a sense of where the characters are in space in relation to each other, and that makes me care about it less. So it's more of that kind of a gripe where it's like if you're doing action, I want to be able to follow how one beat leads to the next so that I can tell, where characters are in relation to
Yeah.
each other. So
Well,
it's not a big gripe. It's just, yeah, it was one of the things that jumped out to me.
right.
So
Well, and in terms of shaky cam, or it's one of those like artistic things that if you use it
sure.
right, it can actually help. Like in the Jason Bourne movies, like at first it's kind of
Hmm.
annoying, but then you realize it's kind of like it's supposed to be chaotic. It's supposed to disorient you because this guy is literally fighting for his life, and when he fights another person from the program from Treadstone, uh,
Treadstone, yeah.
it's like who's going to win because both of these guys are trained as lethal weapons. So it's a really tough fight that's basically like who is going to come out on top, you don't know. And the shaking of the camera kind of disorients you to give you
Hmm.
that emotion of things are uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen. Is our character going to be okay? But when you're watching a vehicle chase and it's shaking for too long, I feel like you, where it's like, I can't care about what's going on because I'm so disoriented and so lost that I
Yeah,
can't keep track of it.
that's
But
more what it is.
in this story, though, I really felt like it wasn't about the action. It was about these guys are two knuckleheads. So I kind of like fast forwarded through the action,
Sure.
cackling gleefully, like, these guys are hilarious, because
Right.
it wasn't as much about the fighting. Whereas, like, if we're gonna watch Karai fight or we're gonna watch Alopex fight, I want to see
Yeah.
more of their tactics. I want to be able to study their moves because they're elegant, they're precise. Whereas Bebop and Rocksteady are just blunt instruments. So
They're
cow,
the literal
pacow,
bull in the china shop. I mean,
yeah,
almost
exactly.
one to one. Yeah.
But it's like,
Yeah,
just
well
give me the big
that's a
pow symbol. I don't need to see them
uh
actually, fighting.
yeah, that's a good way to look at it. It was very entertaining. I have to say. I overall thought the issue was pretty funny and it was yeah, it was just it was such a tone shift from what we've been doing earlier that maybe I didn't adjust to it at that quickly. Also, full disclosure, I read these issues a little bit out of order because I read the four that I was going to do the synopsis for first, and then I went
Mm.
back and read the four that you were going to do the synopsis for. So that changed kind of the flow of how the trade read a little bit as well. So,
So what I did was I read them in sequence, but I took a separate note app and I typed in kind of like phrases for
oh,
each
okay.
for every single issue. And then for the ones that I was going to summarize, I went back to my notes and I used that to write the summary. And for the ones
Oh,
that you
wow.
summarized, I kept my notes and I used them as talking points for things that I wanted to bring up. So like I
That's cool.
oh yeah. So like I put in the notes or in my personal notes that Krang kind of felt like Frieza, where it's like,
He did.
he's the interdimensional ruler kind of thing, and he ends
Yeah.
up killing everybody so that he can usurp control. But he's really more like
Hmm.
a spoiled child or a spoiled prince, where he thinks that like everyone should, bow to him kind of thing. And I had in my notes too about Morbin time, because I wanted to bring that up, but you brought it up anyway, so I kind of just
You know
riffed
I
on it.
can't let that go.
So, but that was kind of fun. So that way too, it's like, again, we bring our different perspectives into this, uh,
Right.
and not look at it the same way. So yeah. Anything else
Right
on
on.
Rocksteady and Bebop or Bebop
No,
and Rocksteady?
I think that's all I've got for R&B.
We like
Comic. All right. Well, it is time to talk about
A
the Shredder. And so you
trigger.
can't see me unless you're on YouTube, but I have a katana. It is plastic, so there's no cutting. Um, but I have a prop
Unless you
sword.
push really, really hard.
Yes, exactly.
Ah!
All right. Anyway, so let us talk about the Shreddor. So the
Let's talk
Shredder.
about him.
So we start off with a meeting, but it is not an AA meeting. It is a meeting of the highest ranks of the Foot Clan. Basically, you could call them the Foot Food Chain's executive combo meal, the McNinja Special, with extra heel grease and a free bunion in every bag. And I only make that joke because Mike does not like feet. And we've been talking about the foot this whole time, and now we're
Way too
talking about
much.
and I just heard the words in my head, the foot food chain. And I was like, foot food, like fast food,
Now
except
we're
it's
talking
foot
about the
food.
head foot, the biggest foot of them all.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes, this has been the best comic to review just because I get to say foot or feet things a lot and watch you squirm.
I don't like it.
Yes. But let's get serious because this is about the Shredder, and
Oh
he
yeah,
is very
serious business.
serious. So, the Shredder is having a meeting with the highest ranks of the Foot Clan, and one of the members sitting at the table kind of looks like J. Jonah Jameson. And I'm like,
He really
is
does.
like, I don't know what's going on with these turtles, but I need pictures of Spider-Man.
Hey,
Um,
they're still in New York too. So
I was like, Jonah, what's he doing there? You know what? Actually, that makes sense that he would be on a member of that group.
it
Um, but
does.
but anyway, sorry, too many jokes, and I haven't even gotten to the story yet. So Shredder, Oroku Saki, adjourns the meeting, and his wife Kitsune, who is the sorceress who uh, brainwashed Leo and brought him back to life, apparently. She actually prods him for some information about where his spirit went between the time he was killed and between when he was resurrected. So this kind of picks up on Karai's story where, he's kind of a ghost talking to her through dreams. Like, where was he between the time where he was killed and that he was brought back? So
Well, it's
that's kind of
presented to as I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think it's important to note that like the way it's presented is she's saying to him, you have a weakness. Whenever people bring up this period of time, you get quiet and you're distracted.
right.
We need to address this weakness if you're going to be a good leader. So you need to get that out and tell me what went on. And so it's in service of we're going to keep you powerful. So expunge this
Right.
thing that's weakening you, basically.
Yeah, and that becomes our framing device for this issue where we get a
Mhm.
flashback of what happened to him because that's another weakness that he needs to cut out of himself.
Right.
So basically, when he was killed, he was crash landed in the underworld for judgment. But instead of being at peace, he just saw it as another realm to conquer. So he charged in through hordes of restless souls who are reflections of who they used to be, and he vowed not to end up like them. He found some soldiers and after fighting them, rallied them together under his promises of glory. They were bored, restless dead guys, so why not do what they love to do and fight? So they battle toward the throne room of the underworld, and Shredder duels this big boss guy in this really heavy samurai armor. And the guy was really strong and skilled, but he was clearly past his prime. So when his breath became heavy, Shredder played it smart. He let the old guy tire himself out, and then he impaled him through the chest. But then we get a plot twist. Under the mask was
Was
uh,
Leonardo?
the ruler of the underworld, which was not Leonardo. It was himself, his future
Yes.
self, the older version of him, who nuked all of humanity, ruled through barbarians and mutants, and had even conquered the afterlife. But since time is not linear here, only his younger self could end this reign of terror. Blech. Only his younger self could end his reign of terror. And he does, because he impales him through the chest.
Yeah.
So back in the now, Kitsune brushes it off as, that's just a dream, but says, it's a life lesson. Don't let it define you. So he says, okay, but he didn't tell her the full truth. You see, where he still sees his old future self every night, not as a warning of like, don't become this version, but as fuel, because the demons of the afterlife made a very terrible mistake. They gave him information. They showed him what's coming. So now he has the opportunity to prepare and do it right. Double down on becoming stronger and even more powerful so that when the time comes and he becomes the old man, he can gut his younger self like a fish and spread the younger man's ashes across his kingdom. He will conquer as he always does. And that is the Shredder's tale.
Well, I'm kind of scared to discuss anything with you now. After all that blade brandishing and talk of blood and conquest. Um,
But isn't it appropriate though? Doesn't it make sense that
Shredders
Shredder,
of future past.
well, yeah, that he would see his judgment day not as a reckoning, but as a missed opportunity for victory, to win.
It it makes so
Someone
much
bested
sense
me.
from his perspective that he would be like, "Oh, this is a gift. This isn't haunting me. This is actually something that
I can
it's kind of
use.
like didn't Doom have nightmares every night about like his mother or whatever?
Mhm.
It's like he's turning his pain and suffering into more cruelty that he's going to unleash upon the world. It's kind of like a similar thing there. Whoa,
Yeah.
3D. Um
3D coming at ye. Yeah.
Ah,
You should definitely check out this video on YouTube because it's going to make way more sense than the audio version.
It is. It is. Otherwise, we're just making noises like we're getting stabbed for no reason.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's very consistent with his character that he would not take the right lessons from this.
Yeah.
So,
And I have Shredder in the background as well. He's actually been loading his gun the entire time. I made a looping animation on a CRT TV behind me. And so he kind of sits there and he blinks with his gun a little bit. And then he puts the gun away and he stares at the screen. And then he'll bring his gun back out and blink some more off to the side.
I don't know why, but I feel like the Shredder having a gun is kind of lame. I
Right?
would rather see him with those like long blades that he has on like his gauntlets or a giant
Hmm.
katana or something like that, but
I'm going to
more
shred you with bullets.
more ninja. I mean, I don't remember where I read it. Somewhere online ages ago, I read like, no, ninjas totally did use guns. So it was a thing. They weren't, obviously the automatic weapons that we use today, or
Sure.
well, not me. You and I, the automatic weapons that you and I use. Hey, FBI.
There are no
Um,
guns being used in this episode. Thank you very much. Disclaimer. Have that
but
flash
I
about
guess
on
they
the bottom of the
did.
screen.
Yeah, right. We need
No
something
guns in
down
this
there.
episode.
But they did use something like that. I don't know. It doesn't look as cool visually as him chopping dudes up. So
Yeah. But at the same time, like how cool was it to see Shredder as a leader? Now, not just of the
hmm
Foot Clan, but he inspired an army of the dead, not through fear or honor, but using boredom as a weapon. He's like, you guys
hmm
look bored. You guys were born to fight. So why don't you follow me and I will give you a glorious battle. It was almost like a Klingon opera kind of
it
thing
was very Klingon.
where it's like Shredder is like, "Do you want victory? Do you want honor? No, those are things that mortals look for. But for you and me, what we desire is war. And what you're doing right now is boring. So come be fighting and not boring." Okay, his speech was a lot more rousing than mine was.
It
Clearly, I
was.
can't inspire people through boredom like Shredder can.
Well, but what they were doing before he walked up was they were kind of just sitting around a fire doing nothing
Yeah.
because I guess they were like, "We're dead. What's the point?" And it was cool to see the shift in his mindset because he started out with they're warriors, so I know what warriors want. They want glory, they want valor, they want to, live an honorable life and all this stuff. And they didn't care about any of that. They were just kind of mindlessly attacking.
Yeah.
And finally he realized, oh no, they need something to occupy them. That's what's gonna get inside their heads. So again, his character has been very consistent all throughout, where we see him thinking about the people around him and how can I get them to do what I want. And
Mhm.
so this is just another case of that. It's just
Yeah.
he happens to be dead while he's doing it. So I did not catch. I want to circle back to your point about Kitsune being his wife. I didn't catch that little story point
Hmm.
when we were reading it before. I knew that she was the sorceress that brought in Leo, but I didn't realize they were married. So,
Yeah, I don't know if they explicitly call it out, but it's like a continuity um point that yeah, they're
okay,
married, which again, centuries ago he was alive. So does that mean that she's been alive for centuries? Were they married beforehand? I don't know how that all went down. I just was
sure.
like, why is the sorceress who resurrected him, asking him these personal questions that he's like, yeah, I'll tell you. Like, what?
Yeah, I was a little surprised that he opened up to her as well. But I sort of explained it away in my mind as, well, I guess he has to have one person that's like a confidant or something, and
Yeah.
and maybe she's it. But her being his wife, that kind of makes it all fall into
Mhm.
place a little bit better.
But
So,
but like this one I feel like was very kind of on the nose as far as someone making a very important life decision and choosing utterly the like wrong option.
well, he's the
But
big bad, right? So
yeah, he's got to
do you have to veer him that direction, or I don't know. My problem with this one is I feel like a lot of the other ones I actually started to root for the character a little bit.
hmm
And in this one, even though it's impressive to see how Shredder can manipulate people and all of that, as a character, he just feels like his thing is that he's evil, and he doesn't there's like not as much to him as a person, I guess.
yeah.
And so I don't know. I have a harder time like caring about his journey, I guess. It's exciting to watch how he can sort of move the pieces around him, but as far as him as a person, I don't really feel like I get
Yeah.
why he decided to be who he is,
Well,
you
and I
know.
think this story kind of gives that a reason and gives his character some depth as well
Mhm.
because he saw his older self, he saw his future, but he didn't see it as a failure. He saw it as a version worth improving. So like if Scrooge
Okay.
told the ghost of Christmas future that his mistake was not being hard enough or cruel enough, so he goes
Oh
back
my
to the
God.
present and becomes an even worse tyrant. That's the answer. So I think
Okay.
Shredder's like villainous superpower would be that he is the embodiment of martial arts, that he can turn anything into a weapon. So he turns anything
Sure.
physical like a katana into a weapon, but he can turn a person into a weapon. So he weaponizes everything. He weaponizes
Mhm.
Aelopex, he weaponizes Karai, he weaponizes even Rocksteady and Bebop, he weaponizes Toka and Razor, and he weaponizes his own future, where his own bleak future. So what he saw was he didn't say what normally a person or character would say, which is, "Oh look, what a dystopia or a dystopian bleak future where I am alone and I have no love." He says, "What a bleak future that I would be defeated by my younger self because I got old." No, he's like, I will not. No, no, no. I will train so hard that when that young whippersnapper shows up, I am gonna gut him like a fish. And that's
Yeah.
his weapon of victory in that moment is regardless of how continuity works, that hey, if I kill my younger self, will I still exist? He's like, I will exist on my ego alone because I am so powerful that the universe will make an exception and not create a paradox, and I will continue to rule and reign. That's how
Through
like
sheer willpower.
completely megalomaniacal he is. And I think
Yeah.
that is what will make Shredder the ultimate villain, the ultimate foe, the big bad
Mhm.
of all of these villains. They saved the best for last because Shredder
Mhm.
can turn anyone into a weapon, even his own dismal future. Like, how can you beat that? How can you defeat that?
Yeah, I like the introduction of mystical elements into his story specifically because I feel like it does make him this kind of mythic figure
Yeah.
that is worthy of being an adversary to Splinter and the Turtles and their whole, having following the way of ninja but having a totally different ethos where they protect and save people. I like those elements in his story. I do think it's unusual, right, for them to have this much sci-fi and this much fantasy in one universe, unless it's like DC or Marvel, where DC and Marvel are basically like every pantheon of gods from every religion exists for real, and
Yeah.
and they're all characters. So this doesn't go that far, but it does kind of elevate Shredder to that level of he's he's not just their enemy, he's like this legend that has to be overcome.
Yeah.
And certainly in Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin, what they're dealing with is very much an Earth that has been already conquered. And
Mm.
how do we pick up the pieces of that? How do we push back? Like the legend has been defeated, but his legacy remains, and the
Yeah.
world has been forever changed by that. And how do we now strike back? And it's actually a very good sort of evolution of where this story shows us that Shredder is going. So I don't know how the mainline comic book ends, but at least the last Ronin story that basically begins, and the Foot Clan has taken over the whole planet,
Hmm.
and there's only one of the turtles that's still alive, and we have like the daughter of Casey Jones and April is a character in it. And so there's sort of these legacy characters, and then it's like the son or the grandson of the Shredder is actually in charge of the Foot now, and he has again taken steps to give him sort of like mythic abilities that will give him an edge so that he can remain strong. So it feels like all of this is very well thought out, and it all fits together nicely as one big narrative. And that part of this story I really appreciate.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, it and really all of these are kind of like that where you can do like a little
Mhm.
character study, and it really I feel like this is a great intro for understanding these characters in a way that enhances anything that you could go read of the Turtles now. Because when you see like
Yeah.
Rocksteady and Bebop or Shredder show up, you're not thinking, oh, here's some, goofy cartoon villain who's
Right.
just like, he's the Shredder, because you got to shred cheese to put it on pizza, and he's got, metal coming out of his armor, so he's the
Right.
Shredder because it's metal, whatever. But it gives him this depth and this nuance and this gravity that's like he is a true threat, that when he shows up you know that something's about to happen, like watch out because here comes the Shredder, instead of the Shredder. It sounds like a can opener, sounds like a what I used to grate my cheese on my pizza, dude. Shredder.
Well, to be fair, like the animated series and the
Yeah.
the movies, even like the live action movies, definitely lean into the comedy angle
Right,
more
right.
than what it seems like the comic books do. So, they're kind of just apples and oranges, like they're different things. But
Sure.
but yeah, I do like the idea of positioning him as a Doctor Doom, where it's going to be an event whenever he shows up, and instead of just like, oh, he's the villain of the week every single week.
Right.
Because I feel like if you use him that much, then it becomes like, all right, well, why do we care about the Shredder this time when he was defeated the last
Hmm.
16 times or whatever?
Right. Well, I think that's true of all the villains that we've kind of said too, is
Sure.
like if we saw this villain every week, it would be very repetitive and it would be hard to
Hmm.
keep it interesting. But because they've taken the Turtles, and they, instead of having Marvel where you have dozens and hundreds of heroes
Right.
and they all have their own books and their different stories, everything is focused on the Turtles, yet they build this entire universe that's made up of things that they might do in other comics. So instead of
Hmm.
Marvel, which encompasses all these heroes and different facets of the universe, it's you have the Turtles, which encompasses the Turtles themselves and an entire universe that's all theirs. You want to move into final thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm ready,
All right.
actually.
We like
Comic. Do you mind if I go first?
No, I don't mind at all.
Because I
I'm
feel like
curious to see what you think.
because it kind of goes through everything I've been saying, and then especially at the end where just like all of these characters have some kind of major flaw, and it's
Hmm.
something that makes them great in the villain world, but obviously, takes them out of the hero world. Yet some of them are kind of more in the gray, where it's like they could go either way depending on how they handle things. But Shredder is very firmly entrenched in the I'm a bad guy, I'm a villain, and I have no reason to change. I see no reason to change. So he's kind of set in his ways, but some of the others maybe, like Bebop and Rocksteady, they're just too dumb to know if they're good or evil.
They
So
really are.
so to them, it doesn't even matter, to that respect. It's
Mhm.
just whoever's going to pay them. And the only people who pay you to destroy things are villains. So, unless
That's
they
very
work at a
true.
construction company, Bebop and Rocksteady's construction, where they, demolish
Bebop
things.
and Rocksteady.
Bebop, Bebop and Rocksteady. Yes. Oh man. But yeah, so I think each of these it's really more than I expected to see. Like each one is not just let's highlight a different villain or let's tell a story that's out of time from our main continuity because some of them take place between actual continuity issues
Mhm.
and things like that. So I think that's really cool to plug it in and be like these are more like character studies where it's really about like in the first micro series, it was let's give each turtle a time to shine and see them do something cool. And
Yeah.
but we kind of get to see what makes them unique and different from the other turtles. So right away,
Mhm.
it's like the ooze is kind of like that wild card of you never know who's going to transform into what. Based on it, and because they're all turtles, yet they all developed completely differently as far as their personalities go. And so we see the villains where it's like they are all completely different villains. If you put them in a room, you would recognize them not just because of the way they look, but because they all are just so different in their journeys. Yet they all have that same thing where either it's a character flaw or it's a weakness that the Shredder exploited. So,
Yeah.
like with Hun, Shredder is like, this guy is an alcoholic, but he's not going to go back to alcohol. But what I can do is I can use that addiction to further my agenda by giving him the ooze, get him addicted to that, and then he'll work for me and do whatever I want. So I think it's really awesome that we had Shredder at the very end because it sort of caps off of like he is the master manipulator, and
Yeah.
there's no question that he is not the leader of all of these villains, whether he's directly associated with them or not. His might will triumph. So, as far as this being like character pieces and the way they really made these villains seem like real people, I'm actually going to give this one a 5 out of 5. Like, I thought this was
Wow. Yeah.
surprisingly amazing for something that was based on the villains of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from
Mhm.
a comic book and a cartoon and movies and animation to this comic of villains. I thought that this was a really excellent comic. And if you read this and you've never read a turtle comic before, I think you'll like it and it will make you want to read more turtle comics because that's how I feel. Is I'm like I this universe seems neat. If they tell stories like they told in this villain micro series, I'm all in for it. So five
Yeah.
bananas ripe, delicious.
Ripe delicious. This this episode is ripe and delicious.
Delicious.
So I think there were a few areas where I had maybe minor gripes throughout. There were times where I picked at the art a little bit. There were times where I was like, oh, I don't think we need this framing device. All of those quibbles that I had were extremely minor. And I think the thing that impressed me the most about this was how they made it all feel like part of the same universe and almost part of the same ongoing narrative
Hmm.
while we're going through eight completely separate stories and seeing eight
Yeah.
completely separate characters. The fact that it felt connected puts this way above the Ninja Turtles micro series that we
Hmm.
did that focused on the turtles a few years ago. That one, it felt a little more surface level, a little more like
Yeah.
they weren't really getting into the meat of what makes these characters tick and what makes them interesting. But I'm like you, I read this and I was like, holy crap, I need to start reading Ninja Turtles. Like I want to know what's going on in the comics more because this fleshes out the universe and makes it seem big in a way that I didn't realize existed before I
Yeah.
read this. And I did not pre-read this like before reviewing it for the podcast. I've owned it for a little bit because I knew that it was coming up, but it really kind of blew me away with how good it was.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that I'm ready to quite put it into like that all-timer 5 out of 5 status, but I'm going to give it a 4.5 because it's really, really good and it got me invested in this universe in a way that nothing really has before, including The Last Ronin, which again, maybe I shouldn't have started with that because I was kind of reading the end of the story before reading the story. But um, I will say that having read that enhanced my enjoyment of Baxter Stockman and Krang's stories a little bit. So
Mhm.
it was cool kind of knowing the outcome and then seeing their origin
Yeah.
in this. So yeah, I mean it's not perfect, but it's so close. And I think 4.5 is like a reasonable score to let you guys know that I really, really enjoyed this, and I think you should absolutely read it. If you have any passing interest in the Ninja Turtles, this is actually a good place to start. You wouldn't think
Yeah.
that a villains miniseries would be, but it really establishes the universe in a way that I wasn't expecting and didn't think possible when I went into this
Right.
comic. So.
So when you see a Flyborg, you're not going to giggle and be like, that's really stupid, but you're going to be like, how cool is it that he's making cyborgs, but instead of people, they're based on insects? And like, how does that cause his mind to think differently because he's a strategic thinker, because he plays chess,
Right,
because he outthinks, like, if he went up against the Shredder, what, how would he fare? Then you can kind of see like from different angles, like if Krang and Baxter fought Shredder and Karai and Alopex, how would, if there was a turf war, how would that get resolved and where would the turtles be in the middle
right.
of it? And I thought it was so cool. Like, what kind of testament is it to your stories if you can write a book just about the villains? Like, the heroes aren't in
Yeah,
this at all. We don't see the turtles cameo. I mean, if you consider the brainwashed version, a
of Leo.
cameo,
Yeah, that's like the only
maybe,
one.
but we
Yeah.
don't actually see them in their real form or their
Mm-mm.
heroic form at any point. Um, so how cool is it that you can tell a story only about villains and it be this good?
I
Like,
know. It's really surprising.
that means that there's something to these characters more so than just goofy cartoons on a screen. And I think we
Yeah.
we hit that point pretty hard during the Spider-Man review where it's like these aren't just characters on a page, like these aren't just pretty drawings for kids. Like, there's a lot of really
Yeah.
personal things in here for people that are struggling with different things that they can almost relate to some of the experiences that these people have had and see the choices that they made, which turn them into villains, and think, okay, maybe I need to make some different choices too. Not because I'm going to be a
Sure.
villain, but because, you start to think maybe there's a different way that I can handle this. And it's like comics that make you think like that for me
Mm.
are the most enjoyable. It's like Star Trek in its prime, where it's
Yeah.
like you're
Yeah.
watching some sci-fi thing that doesn't make sense to your rational brain, but if you strip away those layers, you start to see that these are
Mhm.
just people like, anybody else. And I think that actually makes it look more interesting than if it was just fantastical characters fighting, like, oh, let's see the big turtle and the big rhino go.
Right.
Ah, they fighting.
Yeah, I like what you said about it not being silly cartoons for kids because what it
Mhm.
feels like is that what we knew of them was the silly cartoons for kids,
Yeah.
but then you read this and you understand that there's sort of a logic and a reason for all of the characters existing, and there's like a place in the universe
Hmm.
that each of them occupies that's important. And that's really satisfying to read. It feels so well thought out. It's kind of like
Yeah.
how I reacted to the Thrawn story, where I was like, even if Star Wars isn't so much my thing, I have to acknowledge that this story is incredibly well told and that the way all the pieces fit together is so perfectly done that yeah, it's great. Like it's undeniably great. So
Yeah.
this is kind of similar in that regard.
Yeah,
Like
that's
even if you're
true.
not sure about turtles, like if you read this, I think you'll acknowledge that like, hey, maybe there's something there, you know?
Well, that's true too. And you make a really great point that, like, for somebody like you who is on the dividing line of this is Star Trek, this is Star Wars, and I don't
Right,
cross the
right.
line, I stay on the Star Trek side because that's just kind of how, the thing was when we were
Yeah,
getting into it. That's how the fandoms were. So we were always on the Star Trek side. And then I was like,
right.
actually, Star Wars is cool, and modern Star Wars is kind of better than modern
Sure.
Star Trek. So I'm going to jump ship. Whereas you're like, nope, I'm staying with Star Trek for better or worse, whatever happens, I'm staying with Star Trek. But to actually show you a Star Wars show or a Star Wars comic for you to read and actually go, you know what? Star Wars is actually kind of cool. Whoa,
Yeah,
that's a big deal. Like,
yeah.
and kind of same thing with the turtles. It's like if you can look at these goofy cartoons and these goofy looking action figures and see past the rhinoceros and the pig man and the guy who dresses like a cheese grater and cowabunga and pizza and all the cool stuff that the kids say, it's like there's something like really interesting that you can relate to at any stage of life,
Hmm.
whether
Hmm.
you're young, whether you're middle aged, whether you're old. There's something in here for everybody, and I think that's the great appeal of comics, almost
It
over
is.
other forms, is that it's just so can be so accessible.
It really can. It's the beauty of being a creator and being able to develop a really long form story that takes shape over years too. I mean
Yeah,
that's one of the things that these universes that have thrived. I mean the BPRD and Hellboy is probably the big one at Dark Horse that has kind of just snowballed into its own thing. It's its own universe of characters that exist. At IDW, it's the Ninja Turtles, and they're just as valid as anything that Marvel or DC is putting out. Just
yeah,
because they're not at the big two doesn't mean that it's not worthy of your time. Like
right.
it's definitely been crafted with a lot of love and care, and by people that just want to make good comics. So I think that really shines through in this.
Right.
So
Well, and the different media too really help kind of like make it feel like you said you didn't want I think Baxter or Krang's world to feel small. Like and that's the thing is like
yeah,
we want the
yeah, yeah,
world to
yeah.
feel big, like there's a lot going on, but not too much that we can't keep track. And so
Sure.
like it brought to my mind Harry Potter because if you read the books, she very much created a whole universe within the Harry
Hmm.
Potter universe. Like I don't know how she saw this whole world, but like developed it over years in all of these different books. But the one thing that you can get from the movies that you can't get from the books, well, there's more than one, but because they took liberties, they took shortcuts, they did things differently. But the thing that
Sure.
enhances the story for me is that when you watch the movies, you can literally see the actors getting older. So you feel like each movie
Yeah.
you are growing up with the characters. And that's
Hmm.
something that you can't really get in a novel. You can kind of do it in the comics, but like in the movies, it's like you're watching a real human actor who did grow up, and these weird people in these costumes did become their family because that's literally what they were doing 12 hours a
Right.
day. And it's like talk about immersion, but I think that's what makes a story great is that it's the world building. Like there's a big world out
Hmm.
there, but also why do we care? Like you can have a
Right.
vast empire of all these different ideas, but why do we actually care? What is it that makes these characters interesting? And I feel like TMNT villains delivered on that, and
It
that's
did. It
pretty
really did.
freaking awesome.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's going to wrap up this episode of We Like Comics because they have no bones. Make sure that you head on over to our YouTube channel at Boneless Comics Podcast, where you can watch the video version of this episode and see my sword play with this plastic sword that has a little crease in it. And you can also check out our review and after show for the TMNT micro series that was published in 2012, which we reviewed back in 2023. So go to our YouTube channel, check the playlist for IDW Comics or Season 2 on our channel where you can find those things and listen to those. And we also unpacked our personal history with the Turtles, and I showed off some of
Mhm.
the cool figures, and you showed off a couple things that you have too. So it's definitely, you should check out the episode and the after show for that. But there will be no after show for this because it was a two-parter. I used my
That's
katana to
right.
split it in two.
Should use it to slice some pizza now because it's almost dinner time.
Yes.
Uh, but everybody as usual, be sure to tell us who your favorite Ninja Turtles villain is on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast or on Blue Sky Social or X at Boneless Comics One. Use the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast to let us know what you think of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Villains micro series.
Yes. And also make sure to visit our website at bonelesscomicspodcast.com, where you can get additional info and a link to order Mike's banana designs from our from our Printify shop.
Yes, definitely check those out. And if you like what we do, there's more on the way. Yeah. In our next episode, we'll be taking a look at Star Wars Jango Fett Open Seasons, written by Ramon F. Box, penciled by Raul Fernandez, and published in 2002 by Dark Horse Comics. So don't miss it.
So I'm going to trade in my ninja katana for the dark saber. And if you're a Star Wars fan, you know what that means. So thanks for listening, and we will catch you later.
My backpack has jets. My name's
Boba Fett. My backpack has jets. There you go. That's perfect.
I bounty hunt for Jabba Hutt to finance my vet.
Good night, everybody.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
We like
Comics.
because they have no